Fantastic. I think we're good to start. We don't see any more people in the waiting room. If people roll in, we'll just admit them and we'll continue on with the presentation today. So welcome everyone to our second webinar in the ROI series. We at Headless Commerce established this ROI series to present practical and proven growth strategies and solutions to help e-commerce merchants like yourselves grow revenue and improve your profit margins at the end of the day. In today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on understanding the top factors limiting growth with traditional e-commerce platforms and how headless commerce is really helping brands scale. My name is Dennis Goria. I'll be your host today. I'm the founder and partner at Headless Commerce, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Nick, co-founder of Shogun, angel investor, and an overall rock star of a human being. So let's get started. Just next slide, please. The pandemic has acted as a catalyst to e-commerce sales, providing solid tailwinds for the past 2 years. And as a result, I'm sure a majority of the people on today's call can agree that most e-commerce merchants basically enjoyed unprecedented growth relative to pre-COVID years. Now, while the U.S. National Retail Federation forecasts solid retail and digital growth will continue in 2022, the fact is that competition, emerging technology, and evolving customer expectations have made it increasingly challenging for brands to attract, convert, and retain online shoppers. Today, direct-to-consumer brands using legacy e-commerce technologies find it almost impossible to dominate using performance marketing alone. Unfortunately, Headless Commerce enables brands to scale despite the headwinds facing e-commerce merchants. While Headless has really been around for several years, it is very poorly understood in terms of the fundamental term behind it, and therefore still a staggering 98% of stores are on older e-commerce technology. Brands that move to Headless could exceed the limits of modern e-commerce with flexible front ends and enjoy really an early mover advantage over the competition. There's a lot of questions that arise out of this. What is Headless Commerce? What can it help unlock in terms of the next level of store growth? Which forward-thinking brands have deployed Headless already? Is Headless an appropriate solution for our brand? I'll turn all those questions over to the expert, and I think I'll leave that with Nick. But before I pass along the talking stick to our presenter today, I do have a few housekeeping items just for all of us to keep in mind. Firstly, we'll have plenty of times for question and answer today, so please do type out all your queries into the chat and we'll note them down. We'll prioritize them as we go through. And secondly, if you're coming into the meeting now or throughout the meeting, just please ensure that your microphone is on mute for the duration of today's session. Just out of respect for everyone that's made their time graciously available for today's session. That being said, over to you, Nick.
Right on. Thank you so much, Dennis. Hey, everyone. All right, let's take a look at what is on the agenda today. So this talk will address the specifics of rising consumer expectations, especially for online storefront mobile experience, as well as how online storefront pain points evolve as merchants reach greater scale. We'll also explore the increased attention on Headless as a modern approach to online storefront, diving into its definition, value proposition, and some of the challenges and opportunities when considering options for going headless. When we wrap up, I'll provide 5 key questions to consider as you plan your storefront strategy heading into high season this fall. And we'll also have a really good amount of time for Q&A. Next slide, please. Right on. Before we jump in, a bit about Shogun. We're on a mission to help our clients build and optimize their online stores to deliver exceptional experiences. Founded in 2015, Shogun has been around for over 7 years as a market leader for online storefront software. We have a team of over 160 Shogis supporting over 20,000 clients worldwide. And in 2021, we launched Shogun Frontend, our merchant-focused front-end as a service platform that unlocks unlimited visual merchandising capability, advanced content management functionality, and unparalleled site speed, all in a low-code, no-code platform. And again, I just want to give a huge thank you to Dennis and Tidal for having us on the webinar today. We continue to make massive investments in our partner ecosystem and really value close collaboration with agencies like Tidal who help our clients execute on their storefront strategy. And there we go. All right. Okay, so likely a surprise to no one, consumer expectations are ever increasing as e-commerce gains further adoption. And Amazon has really set the bar and continues to set the bar for seamless experience when it comes to e-commerce. What they lack in product quality or rich visual merchandising and brand experience, they really make up for with immaculate usability, performance, and convenience. And in doing so, they've really spoiled shoppers with instant gratification, not just with their logistics, but with their highly performant native mobile experience with their mobile application. And whether or not you're leveraging omnichannel strategy that includes marketplaces like Amazon, it's important to view omnichannel not as silos, but really as a cohesive set of brand touchpoints that shoppers experience. Shoppers carry their expectations from their experiences with Amazon, whether you're on the platform or not, directly over to direct-to-consumer channels. But the shoppers actually expect more from direct-to-consumer channels insofar as when they visit a brand's website, they really expect a brand experience. And go on to the next slide. There we go. As Dennis mentioned, the pandemic has really acted as a catalyst to e-commerce sales, providing really strong tailwinds for merchants and those entering the D2C space. When you fast forward 2 years, the landscape is now incredibly crowded. By some estimates, there are over 24 million stores online now, with more entering the market every day. Software as a service also has really lowered the barrier to entry for starting an e-commerce business. We've seen businesses ranging from solo entrepreneurs all the way to Fortune 100 companies leverage our products. And this is a great thing for the world and a huge source of opportunity. But not all stores become brands. Beyond offering great products, becoming a brand requires building a highly differentiated experience. I'm going to the next slide. And in the past couple of years, there's really been this step change in consumer shopping expectations, especially for their mobile shopping brand experience. Everyone shops online now, and mobile really has become the dominant device channel for e-commerce. Consumers, again, they're only becoming less patient as time goes on. We're getting to a point where shoppers effectively expect zero lag on page load, even when they're on mobile with varying degrees of reception. If you haven't read the white paper, Milliseconds Make Millions, from Deloitte Digital and Google, I highly recommend checking it out. It has a ton of data that demonstrates the correlation between site speed and conversion rate. Usually that it refers to making sales. My guess is that a lot of this is like very little surprise to folks on this call, as the mobile page speed problem has been relatively pervasive in the e-commerce industry, with solutions really only emerging in the past several years to address the page speed issue. And consumers, beyond performance, they also expect a mobile browser experience that feels native. We've all become accustomed to native mobile applications, and we expect that level of usability and performance to actually carry into our mobile browser experiences. Because although shoppers like experiences that feel like a native mobile application, they actually don't have patience for the friction of a mobile application install for a brand they're not committed to. And folks can be a little bit precious about their home screen real estate on their device. So with so many new companies and products on the market, shoppers are looking for differentiated and engaging visual merchandising experiences on mobile. And so that kind of sums up a little bit about how consumer expectations are changing. But beyond the changes with consumers, there are also a lot of changes in terms of the pain points and needs of merchants as they scale. So as merchants scale, their business is growing bigger, they're making more sales, they're expanding. They find that they start running up against limitations in the online storefront feature set offered by their e-commerce platforms, and more specifically in these core areas. They end up having to make trade-offs between creating differentiated site design and site speed. Their content management use cases also become more complex with scale. And as they adopt more advanced solutions, they have trouble staying agile. it becomes harder to ensure that their non-technical team members can still make updates to the site as they start to explore solutions, in headless commerce, composable commerce, or just more of these, upmarket advanced solutions. And I'll dive further into each of these three core areas where there's these pain points in the next 3 slides. First, let's explore this idea of differentiated design versus site speed trade-off. So basically, the dilemma is that when you're working with the native e-commerce platform tooling for storefront, so like, if you're in Shopify, like Online Store 2.0 or theming or page builders, you basically run into this kind of dilemma. You can design and then hard code a very rich site experience with native e-commerce platform technology, but then it ends up running quite slow. There's too much code, the assets are too heavy. On the flip side, you can reduce an e-commerce site, basically the theme down to its bare bones to make it load really quickly, but then basically you become undifferentiated when it comes to online storefront experience. And you can add third-party applications to your e-commerce through your e-commerce platform's app store to provide additional functionality to your shoppers. But that ends up hurting speed. It ends up hurting performance. And the issue, it's actually a fundamental architecture issue. E-commerce platforms, they leverage what's called dynamic page generation for online storefront. So I'll break this down a little bit. Each time a shopper clicks to go to a new page, API calls go out to the e-commerce platform and all the third-party applications to load the page, and it starts pulling those dynamic. It starts pulling together all those dynamic components and loading all of your theme code in that click. Now, in reality, that interaction, it really only takes several seconds, sometimes a bit more. Which is pretty quick, but it's really not enough for today's shoppers. Again, they're expecting at this point like 0 lag. New technologies, a lot of which are advocated for in headless solutions, leverage progressive web application architecture and server-side rendering. So this is a fundamentally different type of technical architecture. The full explanation would be a little laborious and technical to go through, but to suffice it to say that a progressive web application, PWA, the first time that a shopper clicks to go to your site, the entire, that click is a normal load time, but on that click, the entire website is prefetched and loaded into the browser so that every click after the first click is incredibly fast, sometimes perceived as instant. So again, dynamic page generation, every time there's a click, there's basically, hey, Shopify or BigCommerce, a page is loading, we need stuff. Hey, here's this stuff. And then, hey, the reviews app, are the reviews on this page? No, okay, we don't need that. Hey, email collection form, are you on this page? Yeah, we are, okay, cool. And it has to pull it all together. It generates the page dynamically. Again, progressive web application architecture, it just does this trick with server-side rendering where the initial click is a normal load, but it prefetches all of that content. It assumes that the shopper is going to want it. So every second after the initial click, every click after the initial load is perceptively sub-second. So a little technical, but hopefully I was able to break it down concisely there. Moving on to content management. Okay, so as a brand scales, oftentimes their content management needs to scale in tandem. So by content, I mean all of the images, the text, your links, videos, all of those data become more painful to manage in mass as brands scale. What happens is merchants will effectively outgrow the basic CMS, content management system functionality of their e-commerce platform. And so that's effectively like sections, meta fields, reference fields, depending on what type of platform you're using. Merchants run into this problem because of expansion plans, like global expansion, right? They end up conducting internationalization. where they translate and localize all of their content, for France, Spain, so on and so forth, right? Or because they are expanding by going multi-brand, sometimes creating microsites to experiment with new product lines. But they basically end up having multiple sites, and they start entering that content management headache as their volume of content data increases. But many times merchants actually experience content management pain because they have a desire to go beyond the basic meta fields or reference fields functionality of the e-commerce platform native feature set. For example, they want to be able to easily add custom content fields to their product detail pages without having to dig into theme code to do that. So those are some of the pain points related to content management. And moving on to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about agility, right? The ability to iterate on storefront experience, quickly making updates to the website is really paramount to staying competitive in market. Scaling merchants outgrow basic native merchandising, which is usually like page building or sections, and content management functionality of their e-commerce platform, and they start becoming more concerned about site speed, and they ultimately require a more advanced solution for their online storefront. So they start to explore things like headless, composable, again, these advanced architectures. That ends up creating another issue though, or even I would add, even if they're staying on platform but doing something like a completely custom developed theme, it ends up creating another issue though. To date, many advanced approaches to storefront, like these really advanced fully custom code native builds or headless commerce, PWA architecture, composable, they actually can increase dependence on developers and engineers because they're quite technical architectures that rest on developer tooling. So when merchandising teams become dependent on developers for making any updates or changes to their website, it can really impact their speed to market, their ability to iterate quickly, and that ends up hurting productivity. So merchants need their solutions to be no code or low code, no code, at the very least to empower their non-technical team members to stay agile. And with that, we can start to explore headless commerce, which is a big focus of today's talk. Okay, so what is the answer to solving these rising expectations from consumers and the changing needs of scaling merchants? So enter the headless commerce movement. Let's start by defining headless commerce, as this, it has been kind of a buzzword that has gained a lot of attention, and I would say especially the past 2 to 3 years. And for many, the true definition is still unclear. So let's break it down. Let's start with the colloquial or common definition of going headless. I would say that is really defined as when a merchant decides to use a specialized piece of technology other than their e-commerce platform for powering their visual presentation layer, aka the online storefront, which is the part of the site that the shoppers can actually see and interact with. Taking this approach means that the merchant is decoupling or separating their new online storefront technology from their e-commerce platform software, but the two systems remain completely connected via APIs, via the API and SDK layer. Okay, so that's the kind of the colloquial definition. The true definition of headless commerce is a fully decoupled API-first approach to online storefront architecture. That means that each part of the storefront technology stack, the code frameworks, your CDN, content delivery network, content management system, and the middleware for the integrations, how this build stays attached to the commerce platform, is integrated with the e-commerce platform, and the integrations for all of the third-party applications are all specialized and decoupled. And this approach tends to be a little bit more developer oriented, which is great for teams that have really deep use case complexity or just really immense scale. But I would argue that many merchants may actually be interested in solutions that match the colloquial definition. So more like a front end as a service or storefront experience software, and more of a composable type of paradigm where you're using specialized pieces of software that are really best in breed for doing their job. They want solutions that basically deliver on the value propositions of headless, in most cases, other than true headless, as the latter can require really in-depth knowledge of what's basically front-end web application development to maintain. So let's talk a little bit about the value propositions on the next slide. So again, now that we've defined headless, exploring the value props. So when headless is really marketed to merchants, there are three core areas that are generally harped on. The first one is unlimited flexibility on visual merchandising experiences, right? Being able to create a website experience that looks and feels, more like something like apple.com than the out-of-the-box cookie cutter theme that a ton of other stores are working with as a starting point. The second thing would be advanced content management at scale, being able to go beyond the basic CMS functionality of meta fields, reference fields, etc., especially for multi-site use cases. And the last one, achieve unparalleled site performance, page load time. You can change your architecture to this progressive web application, PWA, type of architecture to get that near sub-second load time. Now, to be clear, true headless, or when you're hearing about headless, it's not a product, it's an approach to online storefront technical architecture. So when you see e-commerce platforms and they're putting this out there, what they mean is, you get unlimited flexibility on visual merchandising by going from an HTML theme paradigm in their platform to using a JavaScript framework, like React.js or React or Vue.js, these JavaScript frameworks and adopting a progressive web application architecture. You get advanced content management functionality by adopting, in often cases, a third-party headless CMS system. These are very popular amongst developers like Contentful or Prismic. You achieve unparalleled site performance by adopting the Jamstack and using a server-side rendering framework like Next.js. So again, what I mean by this is that when an e-commerce platform is saying, hey, go headless with e-commerce, it's not as though they are offering that as a part of their product. It's that they're basically saying, we make this possible, but you're going to go figure out this type of technical architecture for yourself. All of this, it might seem very unfamiliar, or for some of you in the audience, so maybe some of the developers especially, it might seem very familiar. Regardless, I'll go into greater detail in the next slide. But again, it's basically my opinion that merchants that are sub-enterprise level, meaning that they're under 500 million annual gross merchandising sales through their site, through that digital property, may not necessarily be interested in true headless, but are quite interested in these value propositions here. And so let's explore this further by breaking down what a true headless architecture actually looks like, so that you can be empowered to kind of make a decision here. So as I mentioned before, there is a pretty significant difference between the true technical definition of headless and the colloquial way that the term is used. So in that sense, headless really has the ability to solve merchant pain points, but for some merchants, it can actually create more pain points because of how technical it is. So we sometimes lovingly refer to it as the headless headache. And again, this is, of course, a bit of a Shogun bias there, right? So ultimately, make the decision that feels right for you. On the left here, you can see a diagram of what true headless architecture looks like. It's a fully decoupled architecture that's held together via APIs. There are 6 core components. Most of them are JavaScript frameworks, middleware, developer-oriented tools, and software. This includes working with 2 JavaScript frameworks, configuring your content delivery network, your CDN. You would integrate a like developer headless content management system, and you can create also like custom middleware, which are basically these pre-built integrations that make sure that the site still is very performant and loads very quickly. And that's done for the e-commerce platform. So to connect this thing on the left to your e-commerce platform, you need some middleware that connects the head to the body, as it were, right? And then you need that similar kind of custom integration or middleware for every single one of the third-party apps, because again, you can't have API calls going off on every click. So they kind of have to run these more thoughtful background jobs to all of your third-party applications to pull their data so that it's not causing this delay on page load. So again, quite a lot goes into it. And with this type of architecture, merchandising, so when you want to change the design of the site, that's actually done by modifying JavaScript code. And then content updates for like content data are actually made in the headless content management system, which basically organizes the content into groups or schemas of content data. And then code is written to point to where the content should go on the site. So that's a true headless architecture. And it's my belief that true headless architectures, those that are fully decoupled and API first, are best for brands that are at extraordinary scale, 500 million annual sales through their site, or they have such a specific technical use case that they are opinionated as to whether they use something like Netlify versus Vercel, or React.js versus Vue.js, or Gatsby for server-side rendering, Gatsby.js versus Next.js. And if all of those words I just said right there aren't very familiar to you, it may be likely that you're not super opinionated as to which one of those pieces of tech ultimately you use for your solution or is used for the solution. So in most cases, I believe that our merchants are more interested in the colloquial definition of headless. They're simply interested in software that is specialized for storefront, that empowers merchants with advanced features for visual merchandising, right? Page building, it's a fancy way of saying page building usually. Content management, and also site performance. And they want that software, whatever it is, to work seamlessly with their existing e-commerce platform. They just want something that's really an upgrade for their storefront software. All right. Over the past 7 years, tens of thousands of merchants have leveraged our software to power their online storefront experiences. And our team has identified these 5 key factors that we believe make for phenomenal online storefront experiences. And I'd like to share those with you. Great online storefronts are performant. They're super fast on every device, including mobile. They're also dynamic, containing beautiful interactive elements that draw in your customers. They're functional. They're still easy to use and not overly complex. They're personalized. They help your customers find products that are tailored specifically for them. And they're consistent. They're seamless and predictable, which leads to more sales. So with this idea of what makes for exceptional online storefront experiences, let's explore a few brands that are nailing some of these attributes and building phenomenal, high-performing storefronts. All right. First up is OneBlade. So our client OneBlade they were really experiencing significant site speed challenges with their online storefront, to the point where their page-to-page load time was actually nearing 12 seconds. Of course, this was of great concern to their team, as the correlation between page load and conversion rate, especially for sales, is pretty widely understood. They also wanted to conduct a pretty significant redesign, leveraging very high-res imagery, really beautiful stuff, animations, video, but they were challenged with that differentiated design versus speed trade-off that I was talking about earlier. OneBlade was eager to explore headless, but they were also concerned that adopting that true fully decoupled API first architecture may limit the ability of some of their non-technical team members to manage the site still. OneBuild launched their new storefront with us on January 7th of 2021. And the brand was actually able to increase average order value by over 30% when they compared to the periods of Q1 2020 to Q1 2021. Pretty great outcome. Additionally, as OneBlaze razors range from like $50 to $2,500 USD, this increase was really considerable for their revenue. Moreover, they're a subscription business, and they saw net new refill subscribers actually increase by a staggering 579% over the previous quarter. And the correlation of all this improvement to site performance, and I would even say their ability to conduct this incredibly rich redesign, and it was pretty clear that this was driving the results, especially with performance. I think it did quite a bit for them because they realized a drop in average page-to-page load time from about 12 seconds down to about 1 to 2 seconds, even with their very, very rich site experience. Okay, moving on to the next slide, let's take a look at Nomad. So Nomad transitioned from native platform tech, which was a mix of custom theming and our page builder, over to our front end as a service product at the very end of 2020. So from November 3rd to 16th, 2020, compared to the previous 14-day period, conversion rate and revenue per session improved dramatically, each up by 25%. So that's 25% lift on conversion as well as AOV. And we knew that it was related to the page speed increase because they also saw over a 50% decrease in their bounce rate. Needless to say, great outcome for Nomad. And again, moreover, they were able to really up-level on design and visual merchandising experience in a way that really wasn't possible within the confines of their theme. They started adding in these really rich interactions for personalization of their products, as you can see here. And the other thing is, if you go check out Nomad's site, and you go to some of their product pages and you do the variant change for color, you can actually see that when you change the color on some of their product pages that have that color variant change, it actually remerches the entire page for that specific color variant instantly, which is a really, really cool site experience and interaction that was almost impossible for them to do natively. It's one of the first things they did when they switched over. Moving on to Tula. So our client Tula, now a part of Procter & Gamble, makes high-end skincare products, and they really wanted a storefront merchandising experience that aligned with the quality of their product offering and helped tell their brand story. They also recognized the importance of site speed and cited it as one of the biggest reasons why they were interested in the headless movement. So they decided to partner with us for a variety of reasons, but namely that they didn't want to have to build the entire architecture from scratch. And they really wanted to ensure that their merchandising team members would be empowered to still manage the online storefront experience post-implementation. And with this new approach, Tula has increased their site speed by 35%, and they've also been able to much more effectively convey the quality of their products with some really, really beautiful visual merchandising. All right. So this was a lot of content to cover in a very short period of time. So let's quickly review some key takeaways. Consumer expectations have increased, especially in regard to mobile brand experience. When merchants scale, they have more needs and pain points around creating a differentiated brand experience, optimizing site performance and speed, managing their content at scale, and staying agile as they iterate on their online storefront. Merchants are often drawn towards the value propositions of headless, but true headless, API first, fully decoupled architectures, oftentimes it's best suited when there is a very technical use case or a very special use case, or the merchant has reached such great scale that they are opinionated about every facet of their technology, because every choice that they make for a very specific piece of technology will end up having a direct impact, business outcome impact for their bottom line, right? But that really happens for things like, hey, I want to choose between, again, Vercel or Netlify or Next.js or Gatsby.js. That would really only become opinionated at great scale, in my opinion. And again, exceptional brands create online storefront experiences that are performance, dynamic, functional, personalized, and consistent. All right. So I am going to leave you, I guess it's 4 questions. It looks like I'll leave you with 4 questions to ask yourself and your team as you explore your online storefront strategy for the remainder of 2022 and beyond. So the first one is, how are we staying differentiated from our competitors? The reason why this is such an important question, again, is the space is becoming quite saturated. Brands really need to stand out to make sure that they're able to lay claim to their amount of market share. The second one is, are we starting to feel constrained by the out-of-the-box features in our e-commerce platform for visual merchandising, page building, and content management, right? So meta fields, reference fields. Again, e-commerce platforms are wonderful. They're marvelous pieces of technology. They're good at doing so much. And in that regard, they're kind of like a decathlete, right? They're great at all these different things. But sometimes as merchants scale, they need something specialized just for that very particular thing. And sometimes that is online storefront that they need a complementary solution for. So start to ask yourself those questions if you're starting to feel such pain with the native feature set that it's time to start considering something else. Third question would be, is the annual gross merchandising volume, the sales, on our site at such a level where an additional second of load time could be costing us a considerable amount of money? Now, you know your business best, so do your research to go figure that out. Take a look at your metrics. I would also say, there's an amazing tool that Google's put out to analyze your site speed. Please go use that. Read Milliseconds Make Millions from Deloitte Digital. Go and do some research and figure out whether adopting a new piece of tech that really is going to be unparalleled in terms of a performance, that it could make a big difference for you. So, if you're starting to hit millions, tens of millions, it's worth it to look at that research. And the last question to ask yourself would be, are we staying agile as we upgrade our technology? Do our non-technical team members still feel empowered to iterate on the site quickly as we scale into these more advanced solutions? Mike.
Thank you, Nick.
No problem.
Very, very simple, full of just a bunch of golden nuggets there. So I think we can move on to the Q&A period now. So what we'll do is, let everyone have the opportunity, of course, of putting some questions into the chat directly. There's been a few questions that have already come in just through private chat to me here. So I'm going to start with those. And as I get through these, I'll toss these over to you. If there's something more on the agency side or the executional side, let me know if you think you want me to answer some of them, and we'll kind of play it around that way. So let's start with the first one. I think this one's a pretty good one. How do you manage content for the pages, blogs, etc., in a headless environment? And specifically, they said, I'm interested in headless to solve the big issue of sections management within Shopify. Yes.
Okay. So in a headless environment, a true headless architecture, content management would be done in a what are generally referred to actually as headless content management systems. These are incredibly popular amongst developers. Cool thing, you can totally try them out for free. Go check out Contentful and check out Prismic. And then you could also check out like Sanity, I think. Yeah, those would be 3 to check out that are like honestly best in class for dev-oriented headless CMS. They're marvelous pieces of software. They're very powerful. And yeah, that would be the way that you manage content in a true architecture. Again, free to sign up. Go visit their websites. make an account, play around, and see if it's something that you're like, hey, this tooling's right for me. This feels right. The other way, the way that you would do visual merchandising or page building in a pure headless type of architecture. So at that point, like your code, you got HTML, CSS, and then you would have a lot of it's going to be JavaScript though. So you'd be choosing between a JavaScript framework to actually code your custom front end to get in PWA style. So the two most popular sources for that would be React, React.js, and Vue.js. So React is the really most popular framework. It's been really popularized by Facebook, I believe. I would also say that if you're going to choose a framework, I'm biased, would be more biased towards React. It's also like if you check out the developer-oriented tooling that Shopify is creating, or plans to create, that's also React-based. You can also take a look at Vue.js though. It's a very comparable framework. And there is developer tooling, scaffolding, and infra that you can leverage from like Vue Storefront, which is a sister company of ours through Y Combinator. So I'll shout them out. If you're going to check out Vue Storefront for sure. And then you would also need server-side rendering frameworks as well to do the prefetch. So if you're using React.js, you're probably going to use something like Next.js, which is the open source server-side rendering framework from Vercel. If you're going true headless technical architecture, I also recommend checking out Vercel as your like hosting type of platform. And they support Next.js. You can also go with something like Gatsby.js if you want an alternate on server-side rendering. And then the way that you're actually going to build your pages is just by coding. So you'll code the pages, and then when you want to update your pages, you'll just go and you'll edit the code manually. Otherwise, the area where you manage your content data would be in the developer-oriented CMS, and those data are organized in these schemas or collections of data, and then the code is actually written to basically point to where the data goes to on your site. So it's when you'll see what I mean when you start playing around with Contentful or Prismic. It's not like a page builder. It's more like collections of content data, if that makes sense. In our software, it's different. We come from a page builder background, so like if you're going colloquial headless with our software, there's a visual experience manager for building your pages. It's kind of like it's a bit sections based, so you can add sections, drag and drop to rearrange sections. You have a codeless sidebar where you can change your content right there. You can change your images, your links, etc., etc. And then inside of Shogun Frontend, there is also a miniature version of like Contentful or Prismic. It's a content management system inside of the software that's seamlessly interlinked with the the no-code drag and drop visual experience manager. And so in the experience manager, it's a lot more like page building. You're getting a true view of what the page is actually going to look like for the shopper. You can toggle across various device settings and stuff like that. The way that it works in our software is a developer still has to go in and code everything initially, but when they're coding, it's basically making every single section codeless and reusable over and over again. So you basically get this big library of codeless components. If you wanted something that was completely net new, meaning that like you want a radically new section, you would ping title, of course, to go and code that section for you or those sections for you, and then those are added to your library, and then you can play with them from there.
Brilliant. Thank you for a very full answer there, Nick. That completely articulates the end-to-end side of it. I've got another fairly good one here. They're saying, so at what type of growth stage do you notice brands outgrowing custom bespoke themes for Shopify? And is that why they go headless?
That is a fantastic question. Yeah, I think that brands probably start to feel pain. Well, my guess is that they start to feel pain on site speed as they get, up past like 5 million GMV. Certainly by the time they're at like 10 million GMV, they're probably, reading research that's giving them the sense that money is being left on the table. So that would be just purely based on like, hey, can I make more sales by just increasing my performance? So that would be kind of one of the triggers there. In terms of when they're outgrowing visual merchandising, like you basically hit a point where like you have a custom coded theme. It's coded with sections, but you're not able to have the I don't know, degree of control that you want because like not enough of it is in sections, so too much of it is in raw code. Or you're just playing around with just sections out of the box and you're like, no, this is too limiting. I want to make more changes than this. Or you're in a page builder, like Shogun Page Builder or Pagefly or Gem Pages or whatever, and you're like, I need to go beyond this in terms of design wise. And it would usually, you would start to experience, because as you're trying to pursue that better visual merchandising experience natively, something goes like this. You would go to have a designer and they design something phenomenal and you're like, oh yeah, well, this looks so good. I can't wait to implement it. And then you go to your dev and your dev would be like, yeah, we're not going to be able to do it quite like that. And they'd be like, start crossing stuff off on your design spec because they're like, no, if we do that, the site's going to drag like to a crawl. So we're going to have to do that. Or they're just like, we could build that functionality, but it would just be way too involved. Like you need JavaScript to really do that. So no. Or they'd be like saying things like, we can do this, but kind of different than in the designs in the way that you wanted. So if you start feeling like those conversations are occurring, that can be a sign. Yeah, or you're just getting to the point where you're like managing stuff in meta fields or reference fields or whatever, or like managing multiple sites. You're just like, oh my gosh, this is starting to become like really hacky. And like there's a lot of content data moving around, and I wish that it was in like a more organized like hierarchy of the data. Yeah, so those would be the things that start to peel off.
One of the largest toy merchants here in Canada, I was just chatting with them earlier this week, and she had a great analogy to provide, saying it's almost like I have a blanket, and it's like I have all this weight on the blanket, I can't move the blanket, and I want to change the blanket, but I can't move the damn blanket. So
yeah,
just humanizing it to a certain extent of like really from a merchandiser's point of view, or from that let's say head of e-commerce point of view, it's a very it's a sticky situation to be caught in, right? Because as you alluded to earlier, it really kind of impedes and tampers the amount of innovation and speed and agility that we can now go about and implement new sections if we want to, or new features if we want to. So very, very curious to hear your perspective there. Got one more here, or a couple more that have just been front loaded here. So I've got what's the financial investment of going headless? What is the team structure you should have in place? I think this is a very, very relevant one because we see answers all across the board.
And you know what? I actually think, Dennis, you're super qualified to answer that one. So I'm gonna kick that one over to you, actually.
Fair enough. Put me on the spot, no problem. So, I mean, the investment that we see into headless projects, I think, is fairly varied, and really the best way to be able to get down to the point of what exactly is this going to cost in terms of resourcing, so time and really money at the end of the day. So when paying a firm to develop a headless experience, primarily progressive web application, there's a couple other bits as well. So you might want to develop all the component parts in a storybook, and then that kind of, there's a certain process you follow, right? The gist of it, though, I find really to be able to drill deep down into what the cost is going to be starts at design, right? What is the experience we're creating? So if we're able to really mock up a fully fledged design of all the different components, parts, all the animations that might be experienced, then what the developers are able to do is they're able to extrapolate that information to say, oh, okay, this loads in this very interesting way, and we're expecting this animation to look in XYZ manner. It's very difficult to be able to extrapolate that without actually seeing something visual, right? So I find those budgets will vary greatly. We see projects that are anywhere from tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And it's like if you're building an apple.com, that's obviously that investment comes with the visual side of it as well. There's a lot of investment done into design. And typically a lot of that time is spent between the development team, the design team, project managers, solutions architects, and just going between each other and saying, you know what, this is what we've developed. Okay, let's bring the creative director in. All right, you have a look at it now. Does this kind of meet your vision, right? Is this exactly hitting the mark? So all that does take a little bit more time, but I find with the upfront investment, what ends up happening is the total cost of ownership to a certain extent goes down, right? Not to say that your platform fees are going to go down, but really when you're dealing with all those sticky situations that Nick was referring and alluding to earlier of, now we're kind of held back in terms of our innovation. We can't do X, Y, Z. That's really where you see the ROI come into play with certain solutions like this. With some of our merchants that are doing, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales online, something like Headless, taking them to, let's say, front end, certainly would create an additional, let's say, $7 to $10 million in revenue per year just with that change alone, right? So it's not like a surprise. It's really just a function of site speed, experiential side of it, as well as just bringing people back into the site. So that recurring order side that what Nick was alluding to earlier as well. So sorry not to have a very concrete answer there, but it really is just, it's a very diverse sort of industry. There's a lot of things you might see out there. So.
Yeah, and I'll say, and I'll chime in a little bit as well. And I completely agree. It's like it's how much could Headless cost? How long's a piece of string, right? Yeah. I think that the advice that I would give is if you're going true headless, keep in mind the cost of initial development and maintenance. And then also when you're checking out any of the tooling that's not, paying for like development code, but just like look at some of the developer softwares that would be involved, like CDN or CMS, like stuff like that. Just like look at the pricing schedules and be mindful that oftentimes developer solutions, they start out completely free or like very, very, very low price point because their businesses are they're based on like getting developer adoption. So the developers like start building with that and then the company becomes massive, right? So with that, just keep in mind that it's going to be like free or almost nothing for a very long time. And then like one day it'll go over a limit, like a volume limit cap. And then it'll be like, whatever, 50,000 a year or 100,000 a year. So just, your business best. When you're looking at those tools, just closely look at the pricing schedules and look at the caps and then ask your devs like, hey, where are we at generally based on what is in this pricing schedule for the limit on like traffic or whatever it is, or bytes of data. I don't know, just make sure to watch that. With our software, I would say this, like the initial lift in terms of implementing it is very comparable to a custom theme build. So if you're adopting Shogun front end, it's like you're doing a site redesign or a full theme refactor or a migration, which is effectively the cost of a custom theme build. The software as a service ongoing costs, I believe it starts at a couple thousand a month, and then and goes up from there on an annual basis. So yeah.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, Nick, with some of those points, and you just made me think in terms of the the dangers of not kind of looking at those, ongoing fees, right? So there's a lot of things there, and I don't want to give anyone sticker shock. So in terms of the, investment to Headless, if there's more questions around that topic specifically, typically the best way of approaching that is not to be intimidated by the numbers, but approach an agency like us, have a discussion, and we're very, very transparent and willing to work with you guys to essentially be able to pick apart all the different parts of the project and know exactly what you're signing up for, right? Because it's not for everyone and it's not meant to be for everyone. So at the end of the day, that kind of transparency and that trust that can be built up where we can showcase, hey, this is what it is, right? Let's work together to figure out if we're ready to go ahead with it or not. And either way, it doesn't matter because it's your business. You guys make the decisions there, and you lead that from a visionary perspective. So the last question I have here is kind of similar to the last one, but in terms of timing, how long does it take to implement a headless project? I think that's a similar one in terms of how long is a piece of string. So I'll take a shot at that one if you like. I see projects that again, it's really based on the design, right? So in the intricacies of the experience as well. So with certain really high-end design firms that we might choose to work with, because we're really looking at the experiential. Usually a lot of the effort goes into the detail, right? When we're creating exceptional design, Webby Award-winning design experiences, that's the investment that goes into the detail, right? So the way that things animate, the way things that they load in, the little minute, the last little fade of a character, right? Like literally, people are spending hours, days, and sometimes thousands of hours doing this stuff to architect these beautiful experiences. So effectively, with that being said, there's really no barometer in terms of like how long will it take. But what I see, generally speaking, working with Shogun front end, we're seeing anywhere from 4 months up to 10 months, right? That's for like the super, super complex experiences with like international sites, working in Japan and Europe and the States and Canada, all across. So there's really, a mix there. What have you seen on your end though, Nick?
Yeah, I think that the number that we say for Shogun front end is 100 days. But yeah, again, it really varies. I've seen some actually go up in weeks, especially if it's like the brand has some in-house development talent plus an agency plus some experience with this. Like I've seen it go very quick, and I have seen it take many, many months. But I think that 100 days is about the average for us. And I absolutely just want to like echo something Dennis said. I would advise that if you were considering these advanced architectures, to absolutely collaborate with an e-commerce development agency who specializes in this, like Tidal. It's my opinion that e-commerce companies are great at e-commerce, but they do not and should not have a big team of software engineers in-house. And therefore, having a great strategic agency partner that acts as that kind of outsourced CTO or technical advisor that can guide you through these decisions, help you assess cost, help you assess time, help you assess what solution is right for you. I really, really advise that. And, and that will also, I think that type of model where you're relying on the expertise of agencies who have done this stuff over and over and over again, ultimately that's also good for your capital efficiency as an e-commerce company, as opposed to having a ton of technical talent in-house. So there are great agencies like Tidal. Use them when you are making these decisions. It'll help a lot.
I appreciate that, Nick. And you're right about the capital efficiency. I see time and time again, some of our clients are saving hundreds of thousands of dollars as opposed to having all those people, on their bench, that overhead in-house, which is, just a different way of doing business at the end of the day, right? So that being said, fantastic questions today. Thank you so much, Nick. We're elated to have you for the session. Very grateful to have you and, share all the different insights and all these golden nuggets. For anyone that hasn't been able to join today's session, since this session is being recorded, we will be sending out the recording over email over the next couple of days. And that being said, if anyone has any questions for Nick and I, please do follow up with us on the same email thread or those emails that were sent out earlier. You will get definitely my attention and Nick's attention, and we'll definitely find some time to chat or find something to at least help you guys with. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.